Morning. Everybody's so nice here. They put my name on this glass so I can see it through the glass, so I know it's me. Thank you. So I had such a nice conversation with Deepak last night, and he asked me to share a little bit of our conversation, which is very relevant to our theme today of Dharma. Dharma. Do we see it, Jake? Dharma. I don't see it here. Okay, thank you. So, I think in order to illustrate this, I want to share a story. It's a little bit personal, but I don't tell it for that reason. I tell it because I think it is illustrative of this theme today. And it ties in a number of things that Deepak talked about last night, including dark night of the soul, including some of the other things that he mentioned about Dharma and about the yugas. So just briefly, I originally came to work for Deepak and at the Lancaster Ayurvedic Health Center about 30 years ago through a very interesting series of circumstances that followed a real dark night of the soul for me, where I didn't know what my role should be. I'm not going to get into that story, but it was extraordinary as it relates to Dharma, because I basically asked for Dharma, and that's kind of the theme that I want to weave today. And through a remarkable series of synchronicities and grace, I left my previous work and came to work there. In any case, I was there for about 10 years doing various roles. We talked about roles and the changing roles. So my role had changed a number of times. During that first 10 years, I'd been an administrator, a teacher, counselor, various things. So I'd gotten to a point where I really didn't know what my role was. Things had been changing at the center, as things do, everything changes. And I was very gratified when Deepak had asked me to join him and his family and a couple of other people of our friends to go on this trip to India to meet with the Shankaracharya. And what Deepak didn't mention was that, well, he was invited there for a number of reasons, but I think the primary one that I remember was that Shankaracharya really wanted to acknowledge his contribution of bringing Vedic knowledge to the West. And we all know that that's been his Dharma and a big part of his life over, his public life over the last 40 years, something like that. So that was really nice for me to see Deepak receive that kind of acknowledgement, recognition from this eminent person, Shankaracharya. And it was extraordinary to be there because there were all these monks around and chanting and all kinds of things. So at one point, Deepak and Shankaracharya had some conversation. They wanted to have some private conversation. So the rest of us kind of dispersed, and I found myself out in the courtyard. We were at this ashram of the Shankaracharya in Allahabad. And I was kind of still in my quandary at that time about where is my direction now? What should my role be? And I happened to find myself at the shrine of Adi Shankara out there in the courtyard. And so I sat down to pray and meditate, and just to ask, as I'd done on a number of occasions, where's Dharma now? What direction should I go? And ask for some guidance, some grace. So I sat there in silence for a while, just meditating, and then I felt that I'd finished, and I started to get up. And I looked up, and like 50 feet away was this Shankaracharya, just standing there by himself, kind of peering down from the balcony. And he was normally surrounded by so many monks and all this chanting and kind of, it was very interesting. But there he was in just complete silence. And I think, Deepak was going to be leaving. But anyway, when I looked up at him, I felt this presence that he somehow saw me, not me, but saw the I am in me. And I felt seen in such a way that I had nothing to hide in that moment. It was an extraordinary experience. We could call it Shaktipat, we could call it just grace, but for whatever reason, I felt relieved of this kind of burden of what should I do next? Where is my path now? And so and then he kind of straightened up and walked away, and I was like, wow, what was that? But anyway, very shortly after that, Deepak came to me and he said, I want you to bring Jyotish, Vedic astrology, into the Chopra Center. I want you to create a program. I was astounded because this is a subject I'd been studying for 10 years because I loved it. I would do charts for anybody. I was fortunate to have very good teachers in this country and India. And so to have me represent him with this program, was it was a big thing. And at first I said, Deepak, I think I need about 3 more lifetimes of study. This is a huge subject. And I meant that sincerely, because it's a huge subject. He looked at me and he pointed his finger at me and said, you've been preparing for this for a long time. This is your Dharma. I couldn't believe it. And so whatever reservation I had at that point, I let it go and I stepped into it. And I tell you, I'm grateful every day of my life that I get to do that work, that service, using the system of Jyotish, Vedic astrology. And I have the picture of the Shankaracharya on my desk every day just to kind of honor that experience of awakening of Dharma. Because through whatever grace, it was all synchronistic. And I've been fortunate to be doing this program over 20 years now. So I tell you this story because I live and breathe this subject of Jyotish, and it is a very big part, as I mentioned, of the Vedic tradition. It's one of the Vedangas. It's the eye of the Veda. And I don't want to get technical in talking about this, but when Deepak mentioned the yugas, there is some controversy about this subject among Vedic astrologers, but there seems to be much more favor for the understanding of the yugas as associated with the sequence of precession of the equinoxes. Now, not everybody's going to understand that subject. It's okay. And I'm going to try to be brief in the explanation, but because of a wobble in the spin of the Earth, the point where the sun appears to rise every spring equinox, the vernal equinox, is gradually moving backwards through the zodiac. In other words, on March the 21st, the sun is actually not rising in the constellation of Aries. It's, for the last 1,800 plus years, it's been rising in the constellation of Pisces. And at the rate of 1 degree every 72 years, it's moving backwards. So it takes about 25,000 plus years for that whole cycle, where because of this wobble and this precession, that the sun will appear in different constellations. Now, we've all heard the expression, the dawning of the age of Aquarius, right? I mean, it's a popular song and play and all that, but it has real relevance for us because in another few hundred years, on the vernal equinox, the sun will be rising in the constellation of Aquarius, which will mark a whole new period of 2,000 to 2,100 years, a new age. At the dawning of every age, there's often a huge revolution of change. The old social forms, the old religious forms, the old governmental forms, everything starts to fall apart. And we're already beginning to see this now as these structures that have existed are just not serving any longer, because we're going to be, and we are already, and we here are part of the wave, moving into a whole new consciousness as we move into the Aquarian age. And there's so much more to say about this, and I do want to just invite you to watch a very well-made film. It's about 40 minutes. It's called The Great Year. It's narrated by James Earl Jones. It is produced by a very fine astrophysicist, Walter Crittenden. And it explains this whole precession of equinoxes as it relates to the cycles of the yugas. So what I want to tell you is that this 25 plus, almost 26,000 year cycle has, as Deepak mentioned last night, a descending period. The highest state is Satyuga, as he said last night, which is really the longest period. It's referred to as the Golden Age. And then, and that period may have existed around 13,000 years ago. And we have actually very little knowledge of what went on at that time, because it's such a long period of time ago. But gradually, over that period of time, we began a descending period of consciousness. So the Satyuga, according to this theory of the connection to the precession of the equinoxes, the Satyuga was about 2,400 years long. Then it turned to Treta Yuga, or the Silver Age, and that period was shorter in length to Satyuga. And then came a period called Dwapar Yuga, or the Bronze Age, but all during this time, consciousness was sort of, you might say, diminishing. Alignment with Dharma. This is such an interesting subject. I wish I could explain as much as I've come to understand about it. Because Satyuga, the Golden Age, when the sun is in a particular constellation, we are closest, the Earth is closest to what we call the galactic center. And there's a term for this in Vedic tradition. When, as Deepak said last night, in Satyuga, most people are realized, most people are awake, most people are in alignment with Dharma, fully in alignment with Dharma, with natural law. But as we move away, because of this precessional cycle, and we move into descending periods where we're not as aligned with natural law, and Dharma becomes more and more and more dim, such that by the time we get to the Dark Age, Kali Yuga, people are really completely, have really lost a lot of their connection to natural law. Now, according to this system, we have already come out of Kali Yuga as it relates to this precessional cycle, thankfully. And we're now in this ascending period of consciousness, or ascending period of Dharma. Because as consciousness grows, alignment with natural law will continue to awaken. So this has given me a lot of hope, even in the face of all the difficulties that Deepak pointed out last night, that I won't go over again. But we know we're in a time of great turmoil and chaos and change. And a lot of people don't know what to hold on to. And I think that's because of that fear. A lot of people have gravitated to fundamentalist religious practices and ultra-conservatism because they don't know what to do. They're afraid. But for those of us that recognize that consciousness is awakening and that we're not afraid to align with that awakening, it's like the analogy Deepak often gave about the chrysalis and the butterfly who emerges out of the dying body of the caterpillar, this metamorphosis. That's what we're in, as I see it. So it gives me a lot of hope to know that in spite of whatever darkness we may see, or difficulty, or people struggling, or afraid, or all the difficulties we could look at, that if we put our attention on what is really happening, is that the old forms are falling apart, and we're in a new era of consciousness is emerging. Now, it's still slow,
Brent, can
yes,
I
sir.
just make a comment?
Please.
So, last night we had this conversation, Brent and I, because I felt it a little bad by saying that we are in the dark ages, extinction, and those of us who are left behind. But as Brent and I spoke, from a purely historical point of view, written language, as I said, is only 5,000 years old. Oral language is maybe 30,000 years. We don't know. Nobody knows. This evening we'll find out more from Suhas. But recorded history is less than 5,000 years. biblical history is less than 5 years, 1,000. The Vedas, of course, because they Smriti and Shruti, the remembrance is older. But what Brent pointed out yesterday, which is brilliant, it's a very brilliant insight. So in Western historical understanding, they call the Dark Ages first 400 years after Jesus. They're referred to as the Dark Ages. Around 400, in Western mythology, is the emergence of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. We don't know what happened in those 400 years. In India, we do know what happened. Buddha was there, and there was lots of teaching, and Vedanta was emerging. We do know what happened. But generally speaking, the knowledge that we're talking about came about 400 AD with Ashoka, the emperor, who embraced Buddhism. And then we know everything after that. But if you go back, say, 3,000 years, we know nothing. And so what Brent pointed out very brilliantly, and which has always been a mystery, how did the pyramids get created? Okay, how did the Mayan pyramids get created? There are a lot of artifacts today on our planet which cannot be explained even by contemporary science. You can't build the pyramids today, and they were built thousands of years ago. How? So his point that we are actually emerging, we reached the nadir, and now we are emerging, for me, was a very gratifying insight. So thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. It's interesting now because so many people are really getting more and more interested in these monolithic structures that we can't explain where they came from. I'm not going to get into all that now, but it's extraordinary, the things that exist on the planet. We don't know how they were built. We don't know how they were made. But in Satyuga, we didn't really need written language because people were much more aligned with Dharma, much more aligned with natural law. And everything, the oral tradition was really all that was necessary. And that's the oral tradition gradually, as consciousness dimmed more and more, people needed to write things down so they would remember. Anyway, so I urge you to watch this film, the Great Year. It's extraordinary, and it will give you hope because we're on the other side, actually, of the darkest time, and consciousness is on the rise. And many people instinctively know that, and many people are drawn to spiritual practices for that very reason, because we want to awaken. We want to be in alignment with Dharma, with natural law. Now, one other point that I wanted to make from our conversation last night was Deepak had mentioned, at one point he said that Artha is the first of the Purushartas. Now, from one perspective, that is true. If we think about, for example, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the basic needs are at the bottom. And then the middle section are the psychological needs. So as we kind of grow out of basic survival and we grow into wanting to expand our enjoyment, expand our relationships, psychological needs. And then the top of the pyramid is self-actualization, which has more to do with alignment with Dharma and eventually moksha, freedom, liberation. So from that perspective, he's right in that, our first instinct is, how am I going to survive? How am I going to support myself? So in that sense, Artha is kind of there as the basic drive. The reason that in most teachings of the Vedic tradition, Dharma is considered to be the first of the Purushartas is that once we actually are on the road to self-actualization, once we're attempting to make choices, evolutionary choices, we're going to want to have some kind of guidance, some kind of instruction, which, as I was saying yesterday, the parent does for the child initially, guiding them to make, choices that will have them align with natural law and not hurt themselves, not go awry, not create difficulties in their lives. And I mentioned that, at every stage of life, Dharma can change. So The dharma of a householder, as I said, is to have children, raise children, earn a living, maintain a household, have relationship with partners, and in some way contribute to the community. So this is the beginning of kind of the way we think of dharma as, what can I do, first of all, to be significant? What is my purpose so I can be significant, and how can I best contribute to the whole in some meaningful way? So, we do this through career to some extent, when we're still kind of trying to earn the artha, earn the money, earn the resources so we can support ourselves and families. But most people, at some point, many people, I shouldn't say most people, many people become a bit dissatisfied with just making money. And we'll talk about this tomorrow when we talk about artha, because that's not in itself fulfilling. It doesn't matter how much stuff we acquire. There's something still we're yearning for, which is this sense of significance. So this is why Dharma is so important. Now, later stages of life, as we move into the elder phase, some of us here are moving into that phase now, where hopefully we've raised our children, we've contributed that to the whole. We've, like the plant, we've given our fruit and we've earned our way and so on. We've done our dharma through the householder phase. So in the elder phase, we're more in the phase, hopefully, as wisdom holders because of life experience. We've been humbled by life. We've been able to see, to some extent, a bigger picture. So in elder phase, we're kind of holding wisdom for the younger ones, but we have to stay kind of neutral, because we can't keep telling them what to do. In the householder phase, people are learning themselves, finding out what to do. So anyway, these stages, these Purushartas are relevant to every stage of life, because in elder phase, as we've hopefully done our dharma, fulfilled our role, we're able to let go and be more into the moksha realm and beginning to realize what is true, what is the actual truth. So anyway, this is why Dharma is always shown. If you Google Purushartas, you're going to see, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. It's always that way. And so Deepak was very gracious in our conversation about that, and he understood what I was saying. So that's why, Dharma is always shown as the first. And so I just want to go through a couple of points around Dharma. Again, just to reiterate, and you received a card yesterday, I believe, that was sort of an outline of some of the things I spoke about. And each day you'll receive one of those cards relevant to the Purusharta, the awakening of the day. So Dharma is our just to review, Dharma has to do with our moral values, sustains law and order in the universe, how we seek to align with our own nature so that we can be fulfilled, so that we can be happy in living our purpose and contributing in some way to the whole. What is my Dharma? Artha, which we'll talk about tomorrow, has to do with our economic values, the stuff that we acquire in life in order to support ourselves and hopefully support our purpose. It has to do with prosperity, maintenance, the resources we acquire. What means do I need to support my purpose? And what am I grateful for? We'll talk about that more tomorrow, which is so important. Kama is our psychological values, having to do with desire, pleasure, relationships. We'll talk about this day after tomorrow, how important pleasure is and enjoyment. When we seek pleasure, when we have our basic survival needs in place, we seek relationships to share the enjoyment with others. What gives me pleasure and what gives pleasure to others that I might associate with? What do I want is the sole question associated with Kama. And finally, moksha, we'll talk about 3 days from now. Moksha has to do with our spiritual values, self-realization and liberation, freedom through self-knowledge. The sole question is, who or what am I really? So Dharma, as our moral values, what is my Dharma is the question. And I wanted to share that story because what is relevant to me about it is that sometimes we all will go through a dark night of the soul because we hold on to our roles because they feel safe, they feel secure. And some roles are appropriate. As I said, the role of a mother, the role of a father raising a family, these are appropriate roles. And we all play different roles at different times. And so those roles give us a sense of security. But when those roles start to shift, as they always will, everything's changing, there can be this sort of identity crisis. And that's often what happens when we go into the dark night of the soul, because we don't feel in alignment with natural law. We don't feel that we're somehow connected to a sense of purpose. And there's anxiety, there's all the difficult emotions. This has a purpose because it sometimes knocks us to our knees, as it's done in my life a number of times, where I just have to ask for help. And I really feel that moment is the moment, can be for anyone, the moment of redemption. When we say, I can't do this alone, I need help. And that's when the grace starts to flow in our lives, because it's always here, it's always present, like the air we breathe. We live in grace, as Deepak said. We are made of consciousness. We are that. So in those moments of questioning, to sort of reorient ourselves along the lines of Dharma, we have to ask for it. And pray with a sincere heart, because it will come. Someone said to me at one point, be careful. I mentioned this, I think, yesterday. Be careful when you ask for Dharma, because it will come. So be sure you're ready to play your role, because it might mean letting go of a lot of, what about me? Because it brings us directly into the alignment with service. As I said, Dharma is always shown as the first of the Purushartas, because happiness truly depends on our fulfillment of our unique duty to nature. And that's really what Dharma is, playing our role. Because as I said, everything in the natural world has a purpose in relation to the whole. Dharma is preeminent and will determine our relationship with all of the other Purushartas. And more about this as we go along, because if we're in alignment with Dharma, as I said yesterday, we are going to attract appropriate resources and not be looking for more and more and more stuff to fill up that empty place. And if we're in alignment with Dharma, we'll attract relationships and enjoyment of life that is appropriate to us, fulfilling our purpose. And when I say this, in my thoughts, I'm thinking, it sounds like there's just one purpose, but I want to really make that clear in my understanding. Dharma is a state of being of service, a state of how can I contribute with whatever talents, gifts, and abilities I have. So everything in nature has Dharma. The ills of the world arise by disconnection from a sense of higher purpose and meaning. Cancer cells, as we mentioned yesterday, are an example of that, where things we forget our relationship to the whole. And this is where we see a lot of the ills in society today. People are like, how can I, what about me? And unfortunately, it comes from this lack of connection to being. And that's why we're all here. We begin to realize, especially on a silent retreat, that we are already that which we seek. We are already that. We don't need anything from out here to realize that. So Deepak has a beautiful quote: everyone has a purpose in life, a unique gift or special talent to give others, everyone. And when we blend this unique talent with service to others, we experience the ecstasy and exaltation of our own spirit, the ultimate goal. Well, the truth is, we know when we're in alignment with Dharma. We just feel good. And that's why I wanted to say, because my story about the Vedic astrology, for some reason I was drawn to that subject since I was a little child, astrology and the stars. And, it's just one of those things in my own life that seemed to always excite me. And when I was able to really study that and learn about it and actually be able to share that with other people, it's my favorite thing. One of my favorite things is to help other people to see themselves through the lens of the chart, the Vedic chart. And I would do it for anybody. I just did it because I loved it. And so when Deepak wanted me to bring it into the Chopra Center, this was a time where I could align my own sense of purpose with an actual career, at a time in my life when I needed to be doing something for a job. So I really feel, when we ask for Dharma, initially it may not look like a career, but I think if we're true to our quest of aligning with Dharma, somehow or other, nature will support that. It'll find a way for us to contribute somehow. So it's a great mystery, but I've seen it over and over and over again. When people surrender to Dharma, the universe just picks us up, and it's like it's been waiting for us to say, okay, I'm ready now. So I mentioned yesterday, Dharma is from the Sanskrit dri, to make firm, establish, to sustain. Dharma refers to law, path, order, not in a rigid sense, but in terms of I like the word harmonic alignment with natural law. Because everything in nature is sort of harmonious. We talk about the music of the spheres. Well, everything in nature has harmony. That's why we see beauty in nature, because it reflects this harmony. So Dharma has to do with this longing for a worthy sense of purpose, a sense that I'm doing what I'm meant to do, whatever that might be. But you can always be sure it has a sense of service that comes along with it. I feel fulfilled. I want to contribute that. I mentioned universal Dharma, Sanatana Dharma. Everything has Dharma in alignment with natural law, that which gives life order and contributes to and participates in service to the whole. Dharma is always creative in its expression. This is something for us to reflect on. What does that mean? Dharma is always creative in everything. So Swadharma, personal Dharma, a sense of harmonious alignment with natural law, is what we've been talking about here. The drive to thrive, to positively affect creation, and to fulfill our potential, whatever that might be. Discovering and aligning with our unique gifts and talents, abilities, choices we make, the choices we make in life either contribute to or pull us away from Dharma. So that's why we always want to check in, that internal guidance system. Is this an evolutionary choice for me, or is it not? We will know if we're sincere in inquiring about it. Dharma changes at different times of our life. Accepting who we are, being authentic, honoring our own nature will influence every choice. If we're in alignment with our nature, will influence our choices. And that's the point of every kind of religious, spiritual tradition, is to create these precepts that help to guide people in a certain sense to make choices that will keep them in alignment with natural law. But eventually we mature, hopefully, more and more as we grow, and we don't need somebody to tell us, thou shalt not, or thou shalt whatever. We sort of know. We have that wisdom from life experience. So I mentioned birth circumstances sets Dharma in motion, and it's unique for all of us, different for all of us. That's why we have to honor our tradition, honor our ancestors, because we are in some ways the fulfillment of their desires and of their desire to be in alignment with natural law. That's why we procreate, that's why we have children. We present ourselves to the world in this way. Self-referral consciousness. Each part of the body has its unique dharma, having children. I think I went over this yesterday. Our capacity for original thinking, our ability to give good advice and counsel as we become more inspired by alignment with our own nature and with natural law. We are connected with natural law. And in that way, we can sort of reflect the truth of natural law to other people we may wish to help or serve. Certainly parents do this for their children. Many worthy teachers will attempt to do this for their students. Elders hopefully will hold that space for the younger ones, for the family. So learning to trust in something bigger. That's something bigger which is always present, consciousness itself. When we get isolated, we begin to think of ourselves as somehow separate from one another, separate from nature, separate from everything. That's when we go into fear and anxiety and all the difficulties we experience in life. So when we surrender that to the something bigger, which is what happens, I think, when we ask for Dharma, we surrender our separateness. And that's when, as I said before, that's when grace begins to really move in our lives. Ishta Devata is an expression in the Vedic tradition for a particular form of the divine. Oh, it's me, Brent. for a particular form of the divine that inspires us. You know, in Christian tradition, we have many iconic forms, saints, and you know, Jesus on the cross, Mother Mary, you know, all the things. You know, in every religious tradition, they have sort of iconography of different forms of the divinity that will inspire us, inspire different aspects of consciousness. In the Vedic tradition, we have Ganesh, which is the elephant-headed boy, which represents not only the removal of obstacles, but it's also called Ganapati, which means the Lord of categories. So when we propitiate Ganesh at the beginning of anything, it helps us to put things in their proper order of reality. That's why Ganesh is considered the Ishtadevata of Vedic astrologers, because there's so many variables that we have to try to synthesize. We ask for help in putting things in their proper order of reality so that we can you know, be of help, give a message of support to whoever we're talking to. So when we're in alignment with Dharma, our intelligence begins to develop with nature. It's not just the mental formatory apparatus of the brain. We're actually developing, we're being taught by nature. That's why spending time in nature is so inspiring to us. When we go into the woods, and I'll talk later this afternoon a little bit about, you know, sort of a conscious approach, hopefully to walking and hiking, things like that. You know, when we go into nature, something happens to us and we begin to relax our separateness. You know, I mean, we've all had that experience. We look at the trees, we look at everything in nature, is just sharing. Everything's abundant. The sun, as we said yesterday, is shining boundlessly on everything and everyone. So spending time in nature, it sort of enlivens our own natural intelligence, which is in alignment with natural law. And then, you know, we have the ability to express that in creative ways. That's why many artists will go into nature and are inspired and enthralled by beauty that they see, right? And then all they want to do is share this with other people. They want to inspire other people to see what they've seen. And so spending time in nature really, really helps a lot. But aligning with Dharma also helps, because we sort of get connected, let's say. We get connected. Dharma has to do with what is called punya in Sanskrit, which means merit and good karma from the past. So we all have the good punya, you might say, to be here like this, you know, when we could be so many other places and there's so many people that are not here. You know, this is great good fortune for us. It really is, you know, that we could spend this time together in silence and meditation, teachers like Deepak. So I think, you know, all of our choices create this momentum. You know, mantras and spiritual practices and meditation sort of help us. They do help us to stay in alignment with Dharma. Because when we relax in meditation, or when we ask for help in our spiritual practices, we kind of recalibrate. We align with natural law. I mean, it's a great mystery how that happens, but the truth is we're not separate, you know? So what we're really doing is just surrendering this illusion of separateness, letting go. And this is, you know, Deepak mentioned rebirth. This could also be redemption. This is awakening. So Dharma teaches us about our prime values, our principles, and our ideals that we carry in life. And we all know there's some people that are much more in alignment with a sense of Dharma and principles, not to be self-righteous or not to be better than anyone, but really they recognize the inherent value of being in alignment with natural law. Does that make sense to everybody? Does it make sense? I hope it does. Hope it does. So religion, good religions, philosophy, higher knowledge, spiritual disposition, all sort of rise out of Dharma. All of the great prophets, the great avatars, messiahs, you know, that was their a lot of their contribution to kind of inspire people to awaken to alignment with natural law, and awaken to the truth of being. In Vedic astrology, the 9th house of the chart has to do with a number of things. It has to do with father. It has to do with teachers. It has to do with religion, philosophy, and higher knowledge. It has to do with Dharma. It's one of the main houses of the 12 houses in a Vedic chart, having to do with Dharma. So planets in the ninth house. Deepak has so many planets in the ninth house. Not a big surprise. His chart is a great illustration of some of these principles. I use it sometimes when I'm talking about charts. So the ninth house, draws us toward higher knowledge, religion, philosophy, and the influence of worthy teachers. So the father, ideally, in terms of the parental couple, is, in the tradition, is more of the teacher of Dharma. Now the mother is represented in the fourth house of the Vedic chart, one of the houses of moksha. Each of the 12 houses have to do with one of the Purushartas. I won't go into all that now, but the fourth house is one of the houses of moksha. So the mother provides initial safety for us, where we can relax and not feel separate. We feel one with the mother, but we also, this is the great mystery of birth and raising children. If they feel secure in themselves, they carry that security into life. If there's trauma or separation, or Deepak talked about trauma last night, it affects how safe we feel in the world. But hopefully, as mothers, I'm sure all of you that are mothers, did everything you could to create that safety for your children, so that they could be themselves, so that they could feel safe in the world when they went out of the home, when they went away from the mother. That sense of security was already inherent. So worthy gurus, teachers, guides, all point to alignment with Dharma. But they're just pointing. And what they're saying is, you've got to make the leap. We've been listening to Deepak so many years, love to listen to him talk, but he's always pointing, as long as I've known him, to the same thing. Sooner or later, we got to make this step for ourselves. We got to make the leap. And that's really what we're here to, that's why we're here, to begin to have that direct experience. And it gives further potential for our spiritual practices and creates a philosophical state of mind, higher education. The ninth house, by the way, which is associated with Dharma, is also referred to as the house of great luck, bhagya. And the truth is, when we talk about luck, what we're really talking about is someone that is in alignment. Someone that is in alignment, where they're not coming from a place of lack. What am I missing? What don't I have? What isn't here? They're coming from a place more of abundance when we're in alignment with Dharma. And when we are in alignment, we tend to attract more of the same, as I said yesterday. So bhagya is very much associated, luck, grace, fortune, with Dharma. I'm not going to go through this because I'm sure all of you have read Deepak's book, The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. It's his best-selling book of all the 100 books he's written, something like that. So if you haven't read it, by all means, you should read it. But in that book, he speaks specifically about the law of Dharma. It's the first component, which says each of us is here to discover our true self, to find out on our own what our true self is, and that it is spiritual, and that we are spiritual beings, and that we know that inherently, and that we have taken manifestation in a physical form. Dharma, the second component, is to express our unique gifts and talents, as we said. And finally, to be in service to humanity and our fellow human beings. And of course, one of the inquiries around Dharma is, how can I help? How can I help? When we can come from that place of compassion. And when we combine the ability to express our unique talent, then we make full use of the law of Dharma. How can I help? While meditation may be the most direct way to enter the domain of spirit, simply shifting our internal dialogue to how can I help helps to kind of bring us more into alignment with natural law, and will also access our own spiritual nature, the domain of our awareness where we experience our universality. This is a nice quote. Dharma, morality, this is from the Mahabharata. Dharma is well practiced by the good. Dharma, however, may be afflicted by two things: the desire for profit, entertained by those that covet it. And here we're speaking of people that are craving more stuff. and the desire for pleasure, cherished by those who are wedded to it or addicted to it, who think I've got to have more and more and more pleasure. Whosoever, without afflicting Dharma for profit, or Dharma for pleasure, or for pleasure and profit, and follow all three, Dharma, profit, pleasure, succeeds in obtaining great happiness, the Mahabharata. So really, for the first part of our lives, we're all about this, the first three of the Purushartas. But primarily, Dharma gives us our rudder, gives us our sense of orientation around the material desires of artha and kama. So here's a meditation. Let's close our eyes just for a second, and then we're going to adjourn. At various times in life, we may have done this or gone through this sequence before, but let's just close our eyes and begin to bring our awareness to the center, to the heart center. Now, begin to remember as we close our eyes that we are, in fact, spiritual beings having a physical experience. Recognize that that is our true nature. And begin now to inquire of our higher self, the consciousness, which is our essence, and that which loves and accepts you unconditionally. Why am I here? Why am I here? Just let the inquiry flow through you out to the universe. Don't grasp for any immediate answer. Inquire and release. Another inquiry of our higher self. What would I most love to do if I didn't care about how much money I made, if I didn't care about other people's opinions about what I did, if I didn't need to be validated? What would I most love to do? Let that question resonate in your heart. What would I most love to do? If I could do whatever I wanted, I wasn't constrained by the need to make money or please other people. What would I most love to do? Next inquiry is, what are my talents? What are my gifts? My unique gifts? What are my abilities? As we release this inquiry, again, without necessarily needing to grasp onto an answer, just allow that question to flow out, that inquiry. Listen to the body. Listen to the body. What are my unique talents, gifts, and abilities? What would make my heart sing if I could exercise these talents, gifts, and abilities? And as we have this question sort of resonating through our heart, we want to listen also to our extended body, to our environment, to the people around us, the people in our lives, to the world at large, and to nature, to great nature. What are my talents, gifts, and abilities as relates to the whole? What does the whole want me to do? What would it delight in me doing? What would it be grateful to see me do and bring in some way of service to the whole? And the next inquiry is, how do I love to help and serve? How do I love to best help and serve? Just let that question float through your awareness. What comes to mind? How do I love to help and serve? Because when we help and serve, we feel connected. We feel that we're participating in something much bigger than ourselves. And finally, how am I best to be used by divinity? How may I best be used by divinity? We can feel that resonating in our hearts. we can ask, how may I best be used by divinity? So in a little while, we'll have a chance when we have time to do so, we can do a little bit of journaling about these questions. Why am I here? What would I most love to do if I didn't care about money or others' opinions? What are my talents, gifts, and abilities? And listen to the body when we make that inquiry. What are my talents, gifts, and abilities? What gives me joy to express? And how are those gifts and abilities most appreciated by our extended body at large? And the mantra associated with the law of Dharma is Om Varanam Nama. Om Varanam Nama. So just allow that mantra to just gently resonate inside. Om Varanam Nama. Om Varanam Nama. Om Varanam Nama. My life is in harmony with natural law, is the interpretation of this mantra. My life is in harmony with natural law. Thank you. So now let's begin to slowly open our eyes. So today, as we contemplate Dharma as our awakening of the day today, when you have time to sit with your journal, when you have time to reflect on some of the things that were shared today. But mainly, these inquiries, these are the key. Because when we ask, the answers come. We don't know how, but they do. And so that's why we want to be really very selective about our inquiries and make sure that they are evolutionary inquiries. So asking the question, what is my Dharma, and how can I serve? How can the divine best use me? Some of these inquiries. Maybe continue to do a little journaling about it, see what comes, see what naturally comes. Namaste. Namaste.
Right, namaste. As I share some announcements with everyone, the cards are going to begin to be passed out for today's session, so you can